Okay, well, let's get started.
All right.
Thank you everyone for coming to Beer Talks. We're gonna have this is all about technology and how it helps craft an artisan production. If you're expecting some other panel, you're welcome to leave. We will not be offended. I'm Mason Arnold. My company is Greenling Organic Delivery, and we help local and organic producers, primarily artisan producers, get their product. We do home delivery. This has been Runkle of Salt and Thyme Butcher Shop, and Graham of Austin Beerworks.
Yes.
So if you want to take maybe just 3 or 5 minutes and tell us a little bit about what you do and how technology affects what you do.
Sure. So I work at Austin Beerworks, and I guess my day job, what I really do, I sit in front of the computer a lot. So I guess I do a lot of the sales and marketing, kind of social media, answering emails. I also do all the production planning. So we have, we're up to 20 different tanks now. So I have to kind of manage each beer at each stage of the process. But the brewery is kind of an interesting business, or at least the way we run it. So we're really 3 kind of separate businesses. So we're a manufacturer, kind of first and foremost. So we're a production facility. We manufacture beer. We deal with raw ingredients, works in progress, all the way to finished goods. And then we're also a distribution company. So we self-distribute all of our beers. So we take the finished goods. We have about 500 accounts in Austin. We sell everything in Austin, but we have to manage all those assigned delivery routes, all that stuff, get the beer out to where it's supposed to go. And then we're also a retailer. So we have to kind of market the beer to the ultimate end consumer, but also we have the ability to sell beer to the consumer at the brewery. So we actually have to, that's where the social media aspect really comes in hand to market events or to market what we have kind of new and coming out. So all 3 of those technologies have been really important for us to be able to handle it all and to have a grasp on things, but to make it efficient. But I think that the distribution and the retail side is probably something that's more general to any business. This seems more geared towards the manufacturing side, so I'd be happy to, probably concentrate on manufacturing stuff. But any specific questions about anything, I'm happy to answer.
I'm Ben from Salt and Thyme. Similarly, we are many businesses in one. We are a retail, butcher shop, and restaurant, but we also are a manufacturer. We're licensed as a food manufacturer. We do all of our own production of, pretty much everything we sell, unless it has somebody else's label on it, like Austin Beerworks or a few other artisan goods. And there's definitely a lot of regulatory challenges, especially at the scale we operate, to try to meet the regulatory requirements for meat products. And that's definitely an area that we see tech as an asset already, but something that we think will be really valuable as we grow to attempt to manage the massive amount of information testing that we have to do to be able to have that information be turned from something that's just a sort of requirement into something that will actually help us do quality assurance. And I can probably get into more depth in this later, but we are required to measure any number of things that are somewhat obtuse but actually are related to the field. We've been working to develop simple solutions to use readily accessible technology, whether it be just iPad with the numbers program on it to build a spreadsheet to track stuff, up to off-the-shelf data recorders that can track things like humidity and temperature, so that we have access to all this information, and not just in a big stack of paper that we had to write it on, but in something that can actually let us look at what impacts the results we get with our finished product. But also say that I think it's ironic that I'm speaking at a tech panel related to beer, because technology is one of several topics that I feel I know a lot more about after I've had a few beers. We're not drinking today, so I'm not sure how much of an expert I will be. But if you get a couple beers in me, I'll tell you everything you ever wanted to know about technology, and I'll be absolutely sure I'm right.
And Greenling in 2005, we are very much a technology-enabled service. The business model doesn't work if we have to actually talk to everyone we're delivering to. So that building the online aspect and from the beginning we wanted to build it with recurring order functionality. Seems is fairly standard now, but at the time there was nothing at all that did that. So we had to build all of our technology completely in-house and custom. And also we had a very dynamic product with local food and local produce. It goes in and out of availability on a daily basis. So we had to create technology that allowed us to deliver recurring orders of products that could change at any time and repeat those orders. And so it was one of the tweaks that we did to the model, because Webvan had failed just 5 years before that spectacularly. If anyone didn't know, they raised like $1 billion and went out of time doing grocery delivery. And so we studied that model and we said, okay, well, what kind of tweaks do we need to make? And inventory management was a big one. And then the delivery model, they were very much on demand. And we said we'd start with once a week delivery and then kind of work our way up to more convenience as we went through time. But the entire path has been technology driven, and also we've seen and learned and figured out how to help artisans and small producers get more product out, and really on the logistics side of things, because technology can help with so many things, but actually moving it from point A to point B, you still need people to carry that stuff around. So just the kickoff question, how do y'all think entrepreneurs in the like what stories y'all seeing, or how are craft industry using technology to get ahead and succeed?
Well, one thing I think that we take for granted that is related to tech is access to information. When I started Salt and Thyme in 2009, I was 3 years into this path of trying to learn about making cured meats and how is this done safely and well. And there was no or almost no information out there available on this. There was some books written, but most of this was controlled by a small group of large manufacturers who had adapted old traditional processes into modern industrial processes, and they were very protective of them. And it ultimately meant I literally printed out the Code of Federal Regulations. So there's about 500 pages that relate to meat processing, and read them from start to finish, and then started over again. And then by the third time started understanding something from it. If you've ever tried to read, it's all in the paragraph, if this, except in subsection C, and then you're like scrolling down trying to find subsection C. So once that got put online and it was searchable, that was an immediately huge impact. But just the ability to communicate and people's willingness to share information, I think, has opened up so much for any number of crafts that things that used to basically exist only at large scale industrial production facilities, the access to the information and some of the technology it takes to measure things, like we have to measure something called water activity, and the low level, entry level water activity meter 5 years ago was like $18,000, and now it's $2,500. So still a substantial investment for a small business, but obviously on a totally different scale. So I think that just opened the way that social media has changed how people communicate, and also I think changed people's willingness just to share information that used to be thought of as a trade secret, and now is thought of more as sort of collective knowledge to help other people be successful. We're not going to publish our exact recipe formulations, but we will be happy to answer questions about what a USDA inspector is looking for from a food safety standpoint. Has really, in I guess now 6 years, turned this whole the industry on its head, and allowing people to get started and get access to the information they need to move forward. That'd be the first thing that I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. It's almost, like you said, just almost taken for granted that you can, any question you have almost on any field. I know we do it at the brewery all the time. It's just what, whether it's, who grows these hops, or what, out of just a billion questions, just type it into Google or go on a message board in a forum and instantly communicate with somebody in Germany about, or actually probably the exact, something like that. And another issue, same thing with, I'm sure, meat processing. Compliance is a huge deal in the alcohol industry. I think our brewery has, there's like 19 different permits that we have to keep on top, and that's federal, state, city level. But also anytime we want to release a new beer, we have to submit label approval and an image of the cans. Before the internet, you can do that online now. You have to physically mail them the can and the label, and every time it's just like getting a building inspector or something. You never pass on your first time. They always, I guess they're justifying their jobs, but they always find something, something to ding you on, whether the word beer is too small or it's,
or too large,
or the wrong color. There's not enough contrast. So before this, back and forth of just having to mail stuff, just take a month or two to release the product. Where now you can have it done in an hour. So that really helps us get products to market a lot. But also, I guess it just there's more availability of products too, and I don't really know why. Maybe there's just more interest in smaller manufacturers. So there's just more of them, and there's more demand for it. But these kind of technology we have access now to. Like at our brewery, we're a pretty small brewery, really. We make about 15,000 barrels of beer, where somewhere like Budweiser makes hundreds of, 100 million, 20 million barrels a year. So per plant, they have multiple plants over the place. So huge difference. And for a long time, only places like that could afford kind of the automation technology. It was multi-million-dollar things, and now we built something from scratch, basically for probably a couple $1,000, and that and Google and whatever PLCs for Dummies book like that. You can really, all that stuff is readily available if you have a little initiative. So that access to information, but also access to just this technology that's becoming cheaper and cheaper has really allowed the smaller guys to kind of use some of the technology the bigger guys invented.
Yeah. Do you think the ease with which, as technology makes everything easier, now it's much easier to launch a beer company. What do you think? Is that, like, I guess it goes down to is competition good, and what's it going to look like, and what do you think?
Yeah, so kind of what we're butting up against now. So in beer specifically, I guess it's a debate, but is consistency a good thing or not? Do you want each of your batches to taste exactly the same, or is there there's a certain romanticism of making stuff by hand? And I think when people think of, say, a craft brewery, thinking about guys with beards, overalls with stirring big things.
I know those guys.
Right. Yeah. We do that, but we all, we have a smaller system where we get to experiment on batches. But we also have a bigger system where we have put a lot of kind of time and money into automation to ensure that one batch is exactly the same as the next, which is really what the biggest guys do. And so that kind of line of how much technology is too much in a craft, if you're a craft business, or we like to, I guess, artisan manufacturer is sort of what we are. There's some artistry that goes into it, but it is manufacturing. And so it's as much of a, I guess, as much of a marketing thing almost as how automated and how much technology you use in the process. That there's sort of a line where it seems that it's too much. Like if you go to a big brewery, even Shiner, the brewers are guys that are wearing, white collar suits, and they're at a desk, just looking at a computer, overseeing the entire process, and they type in Shinerbach, recipe number 4, hit a button, and everything, all the valves, everything, the water, the ingredients, automatically. And that's great because I like not sweating and not it's a long day of work and stuff. So it's kind of cool, but it takes away a lot of the romanticism of the craft. The craft business that kind of sets the little guys apart.
Yeah.
I'm lucky, I think, to be in an industry that is profoundly unprofitable. So the competition is a little less there. Whereas I think, I'm sure you all know this as if you drink beer. I'm guessing you do if you're here. That there's obviously been a lot of money flooding in to the craft beer industry in Austin, because if there wasn't, we wouldn't have seen, 20 now, whatever it is, breweries and brew pubs either open or be online to open in the last couple of years. And I don't envy, I do envy that Big Can is the more profitable business model than meat processing, but I also don't envy the ones trying to get in it. We as a consumer, both personally, but more importantly as a business that has a pretty limited, but I think we're right in that sweet spot. We have a small list, but it is very diverse, and we do a lot of craft breweries. We get approached a lot, and at some point we just have to. We can't take everything. We used to just new Austin brewery, let's put it on the list, but we can't do that anymore. So it is, I think, going to be harder now. That I think you guys and the core group that really kind of were part of that surge you exist. Some of them have started to fall off and change their branding and stuff, but the core group that started out, I think is going to be fine. But I wouldn't necessarily want to be without a very defined niche starting a new brewery in Austin right now.
Yeah, so it sounds like technology is kind of shifting the game from one of how do you make good beer to more of like how do you market well.
And that's always been, I mean, the thing that separated, you know, big breweries from even smaller regional breweries is just advertising dollars, and you know that it's still that way. That to get a TV spot or, you know, a Super Bowl ad, that's millions of dollars. That's more money. Probably to run one Super Bowl ad is definitely, I think, more money than I'd say 90% of craft breweries' annual revenue. So there's no way you could do that. Which is, you know, I guess I said I was going to talk about the manufacturing side, but that's where the social side really comes in of the retail side. That just with one Facebook account or Twitter feed, you can reach as many people that are as interested in hearing from you, which is pretty incredible. So with basically $0, and actually so we did that 99 pack deal. I don't know, you know, so we made 99 pack just sort of as a joke, as a, you know, branding thing to relaunch one of our beers or rebrand it. And we spent on the whole thing, the boxes and the, you know, whatever, just the concept, probably about most of that was the cost of the boxes. And then put it on YouTube and, you know, shared it with some friends and just our fans, and then just out of nowhere, you know, they shared it to other people and other people and other, you know, I guess that's stuff goes viral, but we got more, I don't know the exact dollar amount, but sort of we were approached if somebody wanted to do a case study. They said they thought we got tens of publicity out of that for not having to do anything, and that's just because of we didn't even want it to happen. It actually made it difficult than normal because we started getting calls from, you know, we don't have multi-phone answering systems. So
how do you ship that 99 pack?
Yeah, right.
I get one in Houston.
Yeah, and so, but I mean, it was amazing. So without having to do anything at all, put any money or effort into something, just the technology allowed it to do what it did, and that kind of, and I mean, any small to do that, it just, so that the tools are there to do it pretty much for free. So we can reach a lot more people without needing the giant advertising budget to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing side, I think, it probably is this. If you all figured out how to find this place, you probably are pretty good at understanding the importance of social media. That, like, it's just so easy now to communicate directly with consumers, and it's a blessing and a curse at times. That, you know, we get the mid-afternoon Facebook message asking if we have a specific cut of meat in the case. As much as I try to stay on top of our social media, I don't have time to be checking Facebook messaging of all messaging platforms at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of lunch. And sometimes people get angry that they can't get the immediate response. But at the same time, you can do stuff like that. And I mean, when you see stuff go from a little seed of like, here's a funny idea, and when it really catches a stellar example of getting free publicity.
Yeah. But yeah, that's something else too. Just the fact that, you know, well, I guess as a small manufacturer, small artisan, you're probably dealing with a pretty local crowd of people. You know, it's a small area of customers, and that, I think, is where kind of direct feedback is extremely important, or direct interaction. So to be able to get a Facebook message or just an email saying, hey, I found this can and it had 2 lids on it, or something, you know, something like that. That happens every once in a while. But to be able to know about that right away and to be able to address it, or just to be able to email it back and say, no, so, you know, appreciate the heads up, come back and we'll swap it out for a different one or whatever, is a really important thing. So just that ability to engage super quickly and easily is a huge thing for a small local producer. Yeah.
I assume that increasing like a distribution footprint needed by some demand, right? On the beer front.
Sure.
Do you feel like you guys are equipped technology-wise for social media marketing to scale?
No, I mean, not really. I guess the tools are there, but the staff isn't. I guess you still need people to do it. That's one of the things I like a lot about being just a local. We sell everything we can make in Austin, and that's sort of what we figured was going to be our growth limiter, but we're always surprised by how many more people want to drink beer. A lot of folks here. Yeah, I think it only works if you have the ability to actually do something about it. So in Austin, like I said, I can invite somebody that had one of the beers to the brewery because I know they got it in Austin. But if we were a national brewery or a regional brewery, if somebody in Ohio said, "Hey, I'll take it back to to Safeway, and maybe they'll give you a refund." It's not quite the same thing. And I guess you can hire more people and have people out in the field, but that's definitely beyond where we're currently at. So yeah, I think our limiter is just staff. So technology is great, but it's still just a tool to help people do what they need to do, and so staff is still the real limiter.
Well, thanks for the question. We'd like this to be interactive. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
How are you all using social media to pulse your customer market for what they want more of?
I mean, for us, it's probably, I would say, a little less important in that standpoint, just because 90% of our business is direct retail, so we get a very direct interaction with our consumers. I think the feedback that we get from social media is helpful about the ability to get a message out to a large number of people, because we're able to get that direct feedback. I would guess it's probably slightly different for you guys.
Yeah, it just depends. So somewhere like Facebook, it's an audience that wants to know about what we're doing already. So they're already sort of a captured audience, I guess. But it's nice from that way just to mainly to let them know what we're up to, and then to be able to interact if anybody has any questions. But then there are other just sites like Beer Advocate or Rate Beer, all these kind of online review sites, or even there's an app called Untapped that's real popular. That's great for us because it's just immediate feedback where actually people will rate the beers or leave comments about them. And they're getting more sophisticated, especially with the mobile apps where they'll geotag, where people are checking in from, so we can see which accounts, even which beers are selling the best at certain areas of town or certain things, so we can use that data to actually to market to others. And hey, look, this bar just two blocks down had 50 check-ins in the last 2 weeks, so this beer's selling really well in this area. So it's pretty cool.
So I've used Untapped before. So are you paying for the analytic data that they are able to provide?
No, and I think there is a paid feature that unlocks some more more metrics, but we just have an account on there, kind of normal. It's a brewery account, so it just allows us to see.
And do you upload your own beers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maintain that list?
Yeah, we try to keep it curated with up-to-date info. And then and also it's a fun place to interact with people. If somebody gives something a really good review or has a comment, or to write back, or if somebody has a really bad review, or just says something mean, it's actually usually best not to say anything, but it's nice to have the ability to have an interaction.
Yeah. I'd say at Greenling, the feedback loop by on our email list more. Anything we put out to social media looking for feedback, we don't get enough for it to really be statistically significant. You try to get that 30 or 100 depending on which camp you're in, and so we send out targeted emails to get information back. Any other questions?
So on the marketing front, and because of all the competition, I see how you differentiate yourself or how you get your message out. Like, where are you spending the majority of your time in marketing dollars, and where would you be spending more time maybe if you had different technology people?
We don't have, I guess we have a marketing budget, not even a budget. We spend money on marketing, but not really advertising. So other than the 99 pack, which I think we took out a Chronicle ad for the first time.
We had a billboard.
Yeah, and we did a couple billboards just because it seemed like a big box of beer. Just kind of look good on the billboards. Yeah, for the first time. The funny thing is that didn't do anything for us. I don't think it was just it was the YouTube video that people really liked that we didn't have to spend hardly any money on. But marketing dollars seems it's more event driven now. So we like to throw big events and parties and have bands, and, give away all sorts of stuff, and they're usually break even at best, but we usually lose money on them. But we just say, hey, well, it's a marketing expense because that's we're saying there's just more and more places popping up, and so and a lot of them are making great beer. So it's you can get a lot of great beer in a lot of different places from a lot of different people. So at some point it's sort of personality driven, and the personality of the brand, and that's where I think that having actually events and kind of direct interaction with people is super important, but it's the, kind of the tech of just social media, being able to let people know that, hey, this event's going on here at this time, with like maybe a 1 or 2 days notice makes it a lot easier to do that, to talk with your audience.
So you're not spending a lot of time on advertising?
No,
You're really just using?
no, not really, other than we just enjoy doing it. We like coming up with silly ideas and silly ads, and I think the only thing that we do regularly, there's it's called Austin Beer Guide. It's a quarterly publication, kind of guys who really enjoy beer, but it's all, they do it on their free time, have regular jobs, so it's all kind of advertising funded. So we'll do an ad in there every 3 months. So we have 3 months to come up with ads. It's a lot of fun, but that's about the extent of our advertising.
I'm interested to hear the other two responses to the same question, or how that affects both of your businesses.
What we do with advertising, I think with paid advertising specifically, is attempt to fill in an information gap about people who we think target audiences that are probably familiar with our name and a little bit of our brand, but may not know all the things we do. So depending on where we're at, we focus that on the restaurant that we have, because obviously we know we had a restaurant, and other times we've actually focused it on the exact opposite, like the retail side, to try to maintain a balance, because it's really important for just for our growth that the two grow somewhat evenly. So we only do 2 paid advertising outlets. We do Edible Austin, and like I said, it's very much a target audience. I'm pretty certain that 90% of people who are from Austin and pick up an Edible Austin probably are familiar with us. So we're trying to make sure that we use that as a way to tell them more about what we do, in case they haven't checked us out completely. And then we underwrite on KUT, which is kind of like the concierge of people moving to Austin, and like, it's like, you know what's going on in Austin, listen to KUT. So it's like, I feel like that's the best way to, and everything else, like we just never even really considered like advertising in more broad spectrum stuff. We get approached, but I'm sure at some point there will be value in that for us, but in the niche that we operate, I feel like if we just get somebody in off the street who has very little reference point to what we do, it can be overwhelming and challenging for them to understand both the pricing structure, the variety of things we offer that they're not used to seeing at a grocery store. And at this point, we'd rather bring people in who maybe are tuned into what we're about, but just not familiar with everything that we do. And then that's how we use paid advertising specifically.
We've tried just about everything out there, from traditional, we've done TV, radio, different print, online. I love that quote. It's I know half my marketing is working, I just don't know which half. I'd say it's probably more like 20%. I know 20% of it's working, I just don't know, and it's easier for us being online, easier than a restaurant, because we can mostly track where everyone's coming from, and so we have full transparent. But a lot of all of the search traffic, we're like, well, how did they find out about us? And that can be harder, and we try to drive tracking with coupons and the embedded in the URLs. We've been putting more tracking things in there to try to understand where people are coming from. But for us, it ended up being we spend pretty heavily online advertising, because it's online ordering. We're catching them right when they're looking for something, and great for us. It's really increased conversion. And all the time I get people that are like, you advertise everywhere, and it's like, well, you just went to our site and then we followed you around after that forever. Which there was like, you could cut it off at some point and be like, okay, show them, like 10 ads and then leave them be. But we adopted retargeting pretty early, so it's amazing that there aren't more people doing that. And because there aren't more people, we end up showing up all the time, rather than someone else who's also retargeting.
What network are you using for that?
I think we do the Google ad network, and then we do one of the others, and I forget. I think we tried a couple and we stayed with one, but I haven't been managing it for a couple of years now, so I can't tell.
First of all, it's an awesome shirt.
Thanks. Teresa bought it for me.
Very good, very good. And I've been in the craft world as myself, but I have a question for you. If each of you could tap a tech entrepreneur on the shoulder and say, go create one thing that would be really helpful to my business, what would that be?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's one of our topics. What's the next killer app?
Digital hangover cure. I would, one of our biggest things is just managing production. So production management software is still really expensive. There's not, as far as I know, a real simple version or an app that can be easily customizable. So just to be able to have an app or something that where you can track a raw ingredient through work in progress to a finished good would be really helpful for my specific job. I'm sure there's a million things, but that's one of those things that just this morning that I was kind of, I'm still having to do Excel spreadsheets and then plug stuff into QuickBooks and go back and forth, and it just using those two, it works, but it's neither of them are really meant for what I'm using it for. But I don't want to spend $10,000 a month on a super high-end manufacturing software suite, so something like that would be great.
Would you pay?
That's a good question.
$1 million.
Yeah, I wish there'd be a way to tie it into
revenue generation.
or just production volume or something like that. I don't know the right way to do it, but for me it'd be more of a convenience issue than a productivity issue. So I would probably say, I don't know, somewhere close to a cable bill or something like that, where it's sort of an affordable luxury, but not necessary.
How much of your time during the week do you spend tracking that, since you're doing it all by hand?
It depends on the week and what we have coming up, but I would say if I really was trying to stay on top of everything and manage it, just the production side, probably 3 to 4 hours a day.
I actually have the exact same answer. It's been something we've been kicking around and toying with for a while, is trying to figure out a way to use either existing technology or something relatively affordable that would be custom made to allow us to track all the data we have to record and, like I said, turn that into something a little more useful. I could talk about this stuff for so long, but I won't. But the food industry, most parts of the food, and I don't know if you guys have to use it, we use a system called HACCP, which is becoming more and more required by regulators. Protocol developed by NASA originally, called Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point. And it is tedious in the amount of data that you have to record, and if you do it in the old-fashioned way of logging it by hand, then you really spend a lot of time tracking meaningless data that you have to hold on file for 6 months or 18 months, depending on your product, and have it available to your inspectors, and it's purely a hoop you have to jump through. But if you can condense that 6 months of data into some kind of, whether it be a flow chart or whatever type of information you're tracking, so that you can see what is happening, it would be actually very valuable information for quality control, inventory management, and production planning, all that stuff. So I do think, and I don't know if I would like would be generic, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but adaptable enough maybe that could also work for a brewery. But I think if there were something in that vein, I do think that there will be much more growing demand for it, because municipal health, it used to just be something that the USDA and the FDA required, and now municipal health departments are beginning to want restaurants and small-scale businesses to use that same hassle of managing these new processes that are like sous vide cooking. For those of you familiar with vacuum seal and cooking at lower temperatures than normal, like scares the hell out of health departments all over the country, and they're freaked out about it. But they also recognize it's this like impending wave of like it's just becoming the new norm, and so HACCP is something that is required for that. And I do think that using it as a framework and it is process oriented. I mean, to make a HACCP plan, you literally have to go through every step. I think that lends itself to pretty basic software application that could be a step-by-step process and then tell you what you need to record or allow you to record what you know you need to record, I guess. And so I do think that somebody should come up with a, HACCP monitoring plan that in a $1,500 to $2,000 range. I bet you'd sell a lot of it because like real HACCP monitoring like that hospitals and stuff uses, again, it's $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 software, not to mention hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of monitoring equipment, which are more and more becoming available for $50 a pop, little data recorders. And if you could just figure out a way to automate collecting all that info and consolidating instead of keeping it manual, I think there would be a market for it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
If anybody wants to work on it, let me know. I'll be your test tube.
And I guess it's a trend for us, data management, but it's more the customer side. We get volumes and volumes of data. We track and record everything that our customers do on the site, but we don't know the context for why they're doing a particular behavior. And we engaged Teresa. She wrote the book on user experience design to help us understand the why behind the data we were getting and how people were interacting with our site. And I wish we could just have her on retainer to continually do that, because we have so much data about our customer that we have trouble really parsing it. And we've actually engaged, but we're probably an edge case for anyone who wants to create because really it's like predictive analytics, but we've engaged with 3 different predictive analytics startups, and we're beta customers, and we either just broke their algorithm or they couldn't tell us anything we didn't already know. They're just like, look at all these charts, and we're like, that's great. You need to tell us something we don't already know for it to be of value to us, and we've yet to find anyone to do that. But our data is more complex than most websites because it is recurring orders and people interact with our website on a regular basis. It's not like a transactional website, which is what most predictive analytics companies would be selling their software to. So we're more of an edge case in that, but hopefully eventually someone gets a predictive analytics algorithm, right, that's flexible enough to handle our kind of data.
I would also say, I think in more than the brewing side, I'm not sure if there is, but there's a lot of hardware stuff that is blowing up, like Kickstarter. I mean, there's been these huge successes to launch, to go back to the affordable emergence circulator. It's actually a company out of Houston that used to do circulators for labs and polyscience, kind of cornered the market on culinary. They were charging upwards of $1,000 for a circulator, and this Nova company has a circulator on the market at $200, and they just did a second round of another big Kickstarter campaign to make it manageable by your iPhone, right? So like, obviously catching up with that should have been a no-brainer. And I think a lot of times, like when you're dealing with manufacturers who are used to very old models, like they don't even think about, like it takes them so much longer to catch up to a trend like that. You could that it should be really easy to manage this thing from your phone, but no one's thought to make that happen yet. There's one that is catching on called the Searzall, and it's basically a little attachment to a butane torch, like a brûlée torch, that will let you sear meat that you've probably already cooked in a circulator without getting a off flavor from the butane. So it diffuses it, makes it even, and things like that are. I think that chefs and I think when you go, if you're opening a brewery, not a brew pub, a little bit of a mindset around thinking as a manufacturer from day one, but most people who are in the food side of it tend to come out of a background of working in a restaurant, and then think, I'm really good at making this sausage or this pickle or whatever. I'd like to transition from just serving that to customers to actually being able to package and sell it. And our brains work a little different. It takes us a while to accept that we have to spend money. You say, how much would somebody pay? It's like, what do you mean? Yeah, we'll mortgage our lives to get a loan to open a place, and if it's included in that spending, then yes, it makes sense to us. But if it's like more of like an ongoing operating expense or a reinvestment halfway into it, we aren't used to thinking that way. We're used to like literally figuring out how to fix the broken refrigerator ourselves, like because it is a low, like restaurants especially are low profit margin businesses. There's not usually a lot of extra money around, and so you just kind of learn how to manage about large purchases for things that aren't concrete. So software and stuff like that, I think, is sometimes a challenge for chef brains to wrap their heads around. Whereas things that whether it's little torch or or a circulator that makes something, a quarter of the price that it was before. I think there's a lot of room for that kind of stuff, because science and tech as part of cooking is like blowing up. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's happened on that, and that's almost all, ways of creating vacuum and boiling water under a vacuum so you can extract flavors and all the stuff that, again, used to all be processes that were totally only available to large-scale industrial producers, are now filtering their way down into kitchens everywhere. Figuring out how to make that technology accessible and affordable, I think, would definitely be a killer app.
Yeah. Nice. Great question. Any other questions?
Hey, can I share a project that we're working on? This company, this startup company came to us, they're called StudyServe. They use RFI tags and sensors on beer kegs to handle inventory management. So basically, right, your keg, say you've got 12 or more beers on tap, if your kegs are getting low, you can go ahead and fire off the order to the distributor, make sure you're not running out. So we went and did a bunch of research at a whole bunch of different bars and talked to people. And
Do you remember any of it?
Any of the research?
At bars?
Yeah. Oh, they were done in the morning. We went in at like 8 or 9 a.m., so there wasn't anything involved. But the guys were like, why would we need that? We just lift up the keg. And I was like, I know, I'm an old restaurant person. So I'm like, yeah, you'll feel like, okay, I've got enough for Friday, right? But as we started interviewing them and talking with them, they started to understand that the technology could give them a huge boon, much more than just being able to know or not. And so the product's evolved over the past couple of months, and now the folks who are using it, they can look at their phone, they can see how fast or slow is my beer selling, which is it comes in as part of the point of sale system, and also with the rate and the sensor. And they can figure out how to appropriately price their beer. So this one is selling kind of slow, so I'm gonna drop the price so I get it out before it's hot, or this one's selling really high. But it also pulls in information from other bars saying this type of beer is selling really well. Perhaps you want to put that on tap. So it starts a conversation with the distributor. So all in all, it's going to be a good investment for them in terms of being able to increase the revenue and not having the product going stale. So it was very interesting just going in and talking to folks with a restaurant background. You're like, I don't see the value to that. I just looked up the keg. But as they started thinking about it, they're like, wait a second, this could really be, a huge what's up. So
and how are they pricing it?
Pricing, I do not know. Yeah, I don't know that part. I've been kind of heads down and actually designing the charts to show how you're supposed to price the beer. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I have more of a legal question than technical, I think, but for Michael, when you mentioned the process of getting labels approved to be able to sell, when you do super awesome lager, is there a process you have to go before you can sell it, or do you just basically put it in kegs?
Pretty much anything you send out needs a label approval. It's different for a brew pub. If you're going to only serve it at your premises, you don't need a label approval for it. But if you're going to send it out into the market to sell through retailers, you need a label approval for everything, and that goes for even one-off beers. Say if we make a cask of something, so we make a standard beer that we already have label approval for, but want to dry hop in it or add a specialty ingredient. As far as TABC is concerned, that's a new beer, and so you need a new label approval for that. And what kind of stinks about it is that the process it's quicker than it used to be, but that's a whole other kind of legal issue of why they test alcohol content. But it takes them 3 or 4 weeks to approve it. So the beer, but you can't submit a sample really until the beer's done. So if you want to submit a new beer, either you have to make like a pilot batch real early on, or you're gonna have to serve the finished, submit the finished beer and then wait 3 or 4 weeks. So the beer, by the time that it's actually legal to sell, is already a month old, which kind of stinks for a one-off batch.
But you don't actually have to create artwork and an actual label for like those casks, for example.
You do, yeah.
It just doesn't have to be pretty.
It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to have the required information. But it doesn't. They don't have any artistic requirements. Yeah.
Like if I brew, I'm a home brewer.
Yeah.
Can I sell it to my neighbors?
Mm-hmm.
I can.
Oh, can you sell it to your neighbors? No, you can't sell it. You can share it.
You can give it to them.
Yeah, you can give it away, but you can't sell it.
What's the
You
difference?
also can't put it in your car
In
and
your
drive
car,
it
that was what I was
anywhere.
gonna say.
Yeah, you can't transport it. There's a lot of stuff you're
That never happens.
And you're supposed to actually log every batch that you make because I think it's 100 gallons a year. I forget what 200 gallons. All right. So you're supposed to keep a log of every home brew that you make, which I don't think I've never heard that being enforced. But selling it, if you sell your home brew, that's definitely something that could that if the TBC heard about it, they would pay you a visit.
I can go on record saying that I'm pretty sure every commercial brewery in Texas would love nothing more than if the TBC started spending all their time reviewing logs of home brewers.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting in their business, but I don't think that's at risk anytime. It's amazing. You talk about FET, I commented about the CFR earlier. If you ever want to get confused, try to read TABC code. I mean, geez, it is so confusing. So we like to sell aperitifs and digestives at our restaurant. Usually Italian or French, low alcohol spirits, and but we can't sell anything that's. And I'm sorry, getting off topic, but I have to rant about this. We can't sell anything that's distilled regardless of the ABV. So Aperol is 11% ABV, but it's still product, so we cannot sell it. We can sell fortified wines up to 17%, things like vermouths and Madeira. And we can sell sherries and ports up to 21%. And I have been told that sometime after Prohibition, when this law was getting written, there was literally a state senator who really liked sherry and port at his favorite restaurant and got that exemption written into that code. And we are still living with it, today. And then there are things that are considered non-alcohol, like they're not considered alcohol products, they're considered like bitters. So there's a drink called Underberg, which is not digital, but it's a great hangover cure, which is like 80 proof, but it's considered so bitter that no one would drink it except everybody shoots it. That's what you do with it. We can sell that. And it's so weird how archaic the TABC is, and I only know it as a retail tier, but I know it gets only more convoluted and confused at the production tier.
TBC could benefit by tech greatly.
Yes, please go fix it. They won't pay you anything, but please fix it.
And there've been a lot of people working on it. It's why the part of the reason I think craft brewing is taking off because of the changes in some of the laws about being able to serve and sell on site and such. So there's definitely some dead end. We deliver wine and beer at Greenling, and it took me 18 months of grappling with the TABC to get that. We were talking about this right beforehand. We're in the same warehouse that Independence Brewery is in. If you've been to their Saturday beer, we're in that warehouse, and we convinced them that we are a convenience store and we got a cartage permit. And so because we're online, and at the time our servers were in-house, we were able to claim that technically that's where the transaction happens. So the transaction does happen in our convenience store, and then we deliver it. And so once I finally got that through, the whole time I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Yes, like I couldn't believe I was actually making it through the process. And at the end, he's describing the rules to me, and he's like, and by law, you have to pay all your pay the distributors cash on demand. Or you can set up an account and pay into it ahead of time, and then they'll draw from that. And I was like, wait, this is part of the law? It's like, why on earth?
Only for beer, not for wine. Maybe for you it's different. But
Just for beer.
For beer, you have to pay cash. You can have terms, but it's not 14 days from when you buy it. It's if you buy it between the 1st and the 15th, you have to pay it by the 20th. And if you buy it between the 15th and the 30th, you have to pay it by the 10th or some bizarre. I mean, it's the screwiest.
And so I asked him, I was like, why does the TBC give a rat's ass how I pay for the beer? And he's like, the distributors have more powerful lobbyists than the retailers. I was like, oh, okay.
They're honest.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And they also, in your final meeting, will tell you about all the resources they have available for you to train your employees and everything. They're always hosted at usually Browne, but one of the largest distributors. They would love to welcome you, and there's definitely a revolving door between distributors and TABC officials too. So
we had, which distributor carries Budweiser? Is that Browne?
Browne.
So we don't use Browne. We end up with we have a smart with, and one day a Browne rep walks into our door and was like, you have a license and you are not selling Budweiser? Are you doing it illegally? Like, what is, basically like, what is wrong with you? And he was rude to us, and we were just like, we don't want to sell Budweiser. Please leave our premises. And it was a pretty funny interaction because he couldn't fathom that anyone had a license to sell beer and we're not selling Budweiser.
So I know, you can draw from the Brewers Association, Michael, and I know there is a Butchers Guild now, National Butchers Guild, and at least there's some information sharing. But you guys bring up a lot of sort of compliance and regulatory things you have to do. There's no one place to go and get all that information, right? And I know it's very location specific because there's city and municipality and state. But there really isn't, if somebody said a brewery or a brew pub, or I want to start a meat or cheese or some kind of craft food, there really is no collective place to get that kind of information, right?
Not really, no. I mean, if you are starting with a business model that you want to go be a wholesale producer, you start with that in mind. You go through the USDA process. There is some information available that, again, somewhat obtuse, but definitely out there. But on the municipal level, it's where most people are operating. It's a total crapshoot. Certain cities have tried to move forward on it. Houston tried and failed, and they're kind of revisiting it. New York City and LA have kind of done it, but that's like I'm telling you all of them that like have figured it out. And that's just on the enforcement side. That's the hardest part about it. It's not that the information is just not available to us as producers.
Right.
The people who enforce the regulations, and what most have devolved to is basically, if you want to do any kind of process which is outside of the norm, which is very limiting, you have to request a variance, and then they tell you just get lost in a variance web of going through this because they don't want to regulate it. They would rather in their mind, if you want to do things like make cheese or salami, you should be regulated by the FDA or the USDA, but there's a huge gap of scale to make that viable. Like, you cannot viably operate a USDA inspection unless you are at, $2 or $3 million a year in sales just to meet the basic requirements to get them to assign an inspector to you. So that gap is for meat processing, especially, and I think for cheese is another one that's definitely in the same kind of vein. There's a gulf there that is dipped over, and I actually think that information being available in education is important, but it's as important to figure out how to do it for the regulatory agencies on a municipal level as it is to do it for producers who want to get into it.
I have time for one more question. Anyone?
I run a startup I call Buy from a Farm. Basically, that it is a marketplace for produce. People can buy produce from the neighbors, and the neighbor can sell the produce to their neighbors. So I call it the Airbnb for produce. So what do you guys think? What kind of challenge and also risk for this kind of marketplace?
I think for produce, I don't think yet. The Farm Bill came out, and there's some new regulations that are coming down that are going to affect small scale producers. But with produce, most everything has like $1. If you're below $5,000 in sales, it's like, it doesn't really matter. You can do whatever you want, essentially. And once you get, and that's it's a pretty low bar, but for an Airbnb, that might fit. Most people aren't, going to be. You probably will have some people try to do it, but in general, I'm guessing people will be fine with that level. Above that, I would guess it'd be like Airbnb and Uber, where you just go do it until a regulator comes and says you need to stop doing this, and then you say, okay, well, what should I do, and then do it that way.
There are some eggs would be one that you might.
Yeah. Produce is fine. Move beyond produce, and you'll run into issues.
Whether you do or whether your users do, I'm not
Right.
sure where the problem would start. But eggs are one that always come up in Austin because a lot of restaurants like to use eggs from small farms, and usually once or twice a year the health department does graded eggs. They're totally legal to sell to consumers, but you can't use them in a restaurant. They're not graded. And you can grade yourself. You pay, something like $15 to become a grader, and then you have to send in a form quarterly and pay them some money, and that's they're graded. It's just purely a way to generate a little revenue for the city. okay. But yeah, so that's always one that gets dicey.
Yeah.
And then dairy.
Yeah, don't even mess with dairy. Yeah, we have to send a monthly report just on eggs, nothing else, but on eggs, a monthly report down to the egg, how many we sold, how many we lost, and how many we have on it.
Counting every dozen, like, oh, there's a burger.
Yeah.
It's a controlled substance.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they come around and do the light, they look for cracks, and it's just like, man.
We have to do the exact same thing, you know, kind of to multiple agencies, report to the bottle or to the can, the beer we sold and who we sold it to, and but it's not because of, you know, concerns about consumer health or safety. It's taxes. So I want to make sure. Yeah, so I would say, yeah, whatever you do, don't put your home brew for sale on that because that'll actually, that's actually something sort of interesting. Like TBC is actually using tech, or at least using social media a lot more. I just talked to an account of ours that's saying they had to pay a big fine basically for something that they posted on Twitter, saying that like a prize that they gave away at an anniversary party, and TBC said, well, that prize is more about, you know, it's too valuable, you're not allowed to give that stuff away. And he's like, I didn't even know you guys had a Twitter account. Like, yeah, you know, they follow all of us, all the breweries and accounts. They follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and they use that. You know, they can use that to sort of monitor our business.
Yeah. Health departments do the same thing. They go through, maybe I don't know how savvy they are on social media, but they'll go through the Chronicle and look for events, and they'll, you know, if they don't have a permit on file for an event that looks like it might have food, they'll.
Actually,
enforcement activity is surprisingly robust.
Google came and offered to do a virtual tour, of the brewery for free. And so, yeah, that sounds awesome. Then I thought about it for a second and turned it down because I didn't want a health inspector or who knows who else just going and being able to look remotely at the brewery and say, I don't like the 3-compartment sink in this location.
Well, thanks so much to Capital Factory for hosting us, and thanks everyone for coming, and thanks to Joanne and Tom for putting it on, and all the hard work y'all do at Awesome Beer Week. I'm sure we're all available for questions after.